All right, so what I'm going to do here is to take the animations out of CryEngine and exporting them out to HDR file format. Then take them into Motionbuilder, where I will tweak the keys, fix a couple up axis orientation stuff, and then import it into Maya, where I will use the Human IK uh, rig and system to transpose the animation that exports out from CryEngine onto our custom one. Hopefully this should be pretty painless, should be pretty seamless, and hopefully everything will work on the first time. So first things first, inside of CryEngine, use the character editor window, find the animation that you want to export. In this case, I'll be doing the crouch, which is kind of a walk side to side, slow. So if I right click on it, I can export to HDR file format. Need to, and that's it. So from here, we'll jump over into Motionbuilder using that same HDR file format. Now, when it does export out of CryEngine, it'll export out both the CAF file and the HDR file. The CAF file we can ignore. It's the HDR one that. So all I'm doing is just dragging the HDR file into Motionbuilder. I get these two. I'll just do a straight HDR import. We'll then import. So if we play the animation, the first thing you'll notice is I am actually thoroughly surprised because normally the animation will be he'll actually be floating through the floor. So instead here you can see that he's actually traveling along the x-axis. Normally what would happen is he would actually travel down the y-axis. And that's primarily because the z and the y-axis are flipped. So in this case, this worked out well. There really shouldn't be anything that I need to as far as it goes with moving keys. Now, in the event that, say for example, that he was moving up and down, the root node here, which should be BIP01, is the primary translate to move the entire rig. And normally what I would see in here is I would see key values, not what we see here in the z-axis. These keys would be present in the y-axis, which in this case y is up. But if we look inside of CryEngine, showed in here, but CryEngine is z up. Got x going left to right, y going front to back, which in this case we have no front to back movement, hence why the animation to Motionbuilder is actually working. So uh, the process again for that is the keys that would be in Y, which would look similar to this, we would simply just copy these, move them to the Z axis, paste them, go in, and then remove the keys from the Y. But in this case, we're actually fine. Because again, no, he's not translating forward or back. So there's the animation. Actually looks good. And all we have to do is save it out. I said it's stupidly simple. Now I'm going to name it the same as the file that came out. And instead, again, this is just for our workflow. Take out TAC for tactical because we're going to be changing it from weapon to no weapon. Put MW, and we're not doing multiple iterations. I'll take that out. So we've got crouch, walking to the side, no weapons, walking to the right. We'll save it. No fancy things, just this is all default. I haven't set up any custom stuff, just straight out of Motionbuilder. Go ahead and minimize Motionbuilder and open up. All right, so there's a couple quirks, and I'm going to make sure that I go over these and cover these, but this is where the bulk of our work's going to be. So far we just exported out the HDR file from CryEngine, imported it into Motionbuilder. In this case, I didn't have to adjust the Y and Z axis, flip them basically, because there was no movement for Z. So we actually lucked out there. Now the process for this, again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take in the animation data from the rig that exports out of CryEngine and superimposing it over onto our custom rig. So to start with, I've created just a base file here. And this is one that I work with since all the animations are being applied to the same exact rig. it's important to stay from the same rig. Light bit here. Ignore this. More than likely, you'll be starting out your scene in the y-axis up. I'm just going to reload it so perspective camera isn't flipped. And this should be how most, if you're used to working in Maya, you're used to working in Y. Okay, so let me explain what I've got going on here in this scene. So this is the custom rig that we're using. It's similar, but there's some differences in there, primarily just some different controls that our animators have used for the rig. So this is one of the stock rigs that comes with CryEngine, so it's very similar, but again, slightly different. Now what I've done in this base file setup is I've taken Bippo1, I've put him into just a traditional standard T-pose, and using the human IK system, all I've done is I have just defined a skeleton. Now, in order to get these green keys or get the joints that go green, I won't go into depth on it, but essentially what you do is you will select the joint that you want, right click on it, assign selected bone. So this is just a time saver for me. Again, the process for this is I would select Bippo1, selecting the root. I would go into here, define skeleton, which would then define this character, and you would see a stop sign. It says, joints are on here, and then simply going through selecting each leg, and you can see right thigh, assign it, right click, assign bone, so on and so forth, and go. So instead of doing that for every single file, I've just created this base file. Again, that's just our default rig in a T-pose, select the joint, assign skeleton, and assign the bones. And that's all I've done with this file, nothing else here. Okay, so we'll start with this. I will go ahead and save the scene out, override here. Now, where I'm saving it out to is just on my local system. It is not actually in, as we'll see later, inside of CryEngine game SDK folder. It is important that when you go to compile the animation, that it is inside that game SDK. But again, I'll show you that process. So I'm going to go and take the same thing as the original animation name. Now, attack, change rifle to no weapon, and third person. Again, just a standard my file, my ASCII, nothing fancy. All right, that's in now. Now this next process again is going to be taking that animation data that we exported out of Motionbuilder, applying it to its own skeletal rig, and then superimposing it. So let's go ahead and I'm going to import that FBX file that we just exported. Should be crouch, walk just right up. There we go. So our animation comes in. Now, if you notice, he is backwards. This unfortunately is a side effect of CryEngine. For the powers that be, they decided that it was best to have the skeletal rig facing in the negative Z. No worries, we can work around it. Nothing we need to do at this point to fix that. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and assign this to its own layer so we can stay up to speed on which one's which. So the yellow rig will be our custom rig, and the green will be the SDK. All right, so now the process for characterizing it in the human IK system requires that for it to work best if the character is in a T-pose. So how do we get this rig into a T-pose? Well, there's a couple ways we could do it. I'll give you the hard way first, and then I'll show you the easy way. The hard way is we would have to reset joints, put him basically into this T-pose. I'll be honest, not wanting to spend that much time, so we're going to do something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the timeline, and we'll put it to a negative keyframe. Reason being for that is if I select our the rig that we imported, you can see that all the keys range from 49 frames for the animation from 0 to 49. So I don't want to do anything that would destroy that animation information. So when I put a negative keyframe on here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make I'm going to bring in a rig that I did, similar to a base file that I did with the custom character that is just the T-pose. Spent probably about 15 minutes or so orienting the joints to put him into a T position. So I'm going to go ahead, import that, and let's go to my base files and a CryEngine base rig and a T. And I guess I should say too, let me go ahead and hide everything. That is the CryEngine custom rig. So it's the same one that we're seeing that exported out with the HDR file, but in this case, it's just the T-pose. And to explain how I got to this, I found an animation inside of the character editor that was similar to just the character sitting there in T-pose. So it got me 90–95% of my joints oriented correctly. I just simply moved the arms into position a little bit better. As you can see here, it's not perfect, but that's okay. And you'll see later, you want to get as close as possible. Obviously, the finer tuned. Okay, so I'm going to select that rig that we just brought in, which is this SDK rig. And you can see I have a key on keyframe -1. So I'll go ahead and bring back my SDK rig. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the key over from the T-pose rig onto the SDK rig so I can have the SDK rig standing in that T-pose position. But to make sure that I do this correctly, some of the bones that export out of here, get lucky and select one. Some of the joints that come out of here don't actually have keyframes on all of them. So what I found the easiest way to do this is I will select the root BIPO1 on our Crytek animation export, and I've got a hotkey here, which is just select hierarchy. All that does is selects all the joints below it, just everything in the hierarchy. But you can also do that from edit, select hierarchy, rather than just double clicking on a hotkey here. So that's all that's doing. So I'm going to select hierarchy, and on frame 0, I'm going to select my translate to rotates to scale, and right click key selected. So all this is doing is just ensuring that the animation data from 0 on, there's at least one keyframe because I'm going to be putting my T-pose keyframes on negative. All right, so next step, I'm going to select the T-pose rig, select hierarchy. So I've got everything selected underneath it. I'm going to shift, left click on -1, right click, letting go of shift, and I'm going to copy. I'm going to copy all of those keyframes. Select my BIPO1, which is my animation. Select hierarchy, thing, shift left click, then right click, paste, bam. Oh no, it disappeared. It's actually right there. So you can see that now what it's done is it's copied all of that join information and put the animation into a T-pose. When I go to 0, we're back to the animation. All right, so I am done using the SDK rig. I will take that out. I don't need that T-pose anymore because I've got all my information on. Good time to save since it can sometimes buggy on these next steps. All right, so I've got the skeleton layer in here from our custom character, and then our mesh. So again, yellow is our custom animation, green is the information that came out of our export. Okay. Now that it is in, now what we need to do is we need to link the two rigs. So I'm reading through my notes here real quick because I got to make sure that this is very specific. So it's very important that you follow these steps. Otherwise, the custom rig that we're transposing the animation data to will get messed up. So, okay, so this is the key part. So I'm going to select the BIPO1, which is, like I said before, that's our main rig movement and translation. So that's the important one. I'm going to select BIPO1 of my joints, still on -1, and I'm going to rotate Z 180 degrees. Reason being for this is whenever you're establishing your T-pose inside of Human IK, the rig needs to be facing in positive Z direction. It works best that way. Like I said, it's quirky that Crytek decided to use it in negative Z for the animations. But again, what's nice about this is rotating it 180 degrees. See that the animation still faces the way that it needs to be. So the rig is now facing positive Z, and go ahead and define a skeleton. So same process as I used inside of establishing my template file. This is that exact same process. So I will select the root and just the root, not the hierarchy. Go into human IK, define skeleton. This is what we'll get. Validation status, missing required bones. Um, the process that you can go for this is you can do it by hand, where you can select one, right click, assign bone. However, after you've done that with the rig, you can save it out as a template, which is what the save button is. So I've already done that. And because this rig is the exact same name every single time, all I have to do is just have to select the root node and open. And then here, I saved a preset out called CryEngine HDR BIP01. All that is just tells me that this is my CryEngine rig. And the HDR underscore BIP01 is just to make sure that the naming convention, now you can't do colons in the naming convention, but it just tells me that the base file, the base rig just needs to name this. Again, this is just purely for me and organization. So match bones with prefix and assign. So you can see it's hooked up all the joints. We can go in and see that it's got our spines. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what Human IK is doing, essentially it's saying that left arm is now associated with arm. So it just saves you the time of right-clicking. All right, those hooked up. Now what we're going to do is we're going to switch back to character 1, which is our custom rig. And I'm going to do my source as character 2. Fingers crossed this works. All right, I think it did. Yay! That's why I said it's important to follow the steps. So what we have going on here now is all the animation that's on our BIP01, so we can see all the keys. All the animation data on this rig is now driving our custom rig. As you can see here, I'll go ahead and just let this loop. Some things are slightly off. The beauty about the Human IK system in using this is that it's using the limit information, so how far a joint can rotate, move, etc., on our custom animation. It's making sure that it doesn't exceed those boundaries. So instead of copying the keys directly, which could potentially break the rig, um, it's blending. And you'll see that's what this the pair blend output is doing. So if I select the custom animation, you see that there are no keys on this. Graph editor, you'll see the same thing. The keys that are there are just simply from that initial starting pose. That's it. So all of the animation is being driven by the SDK rig. So as a safety precaution, if I want to make any adjustments, I'll go ahead and just reference the layer for the skeleton layer or hide it. Because again, all of my adjustments are going to be made on the SDK. So I will go through really fast because you can see there's a couple joint locking issues, twisting, and whatnot. So I'm going to select all it. There we go. I'm going to select the hand and and this is not going to be a crash course in animation, but I will show you how to just quickly change it. So looks like it's our rotate Z. Take all my keys. And you can see here is the -1. I'm just going to take everything from over and take this X, bring it back so you can see there the wrist is kind of abnormally deformed. I'm just going to take it back to some semi-normal so it looks good. This wrist here, yep, right hand thing, we'll do X. See here, There are no keys after this is my 0 key. Just to quickly place Y key. Just something in a more natural position as if you weren't holding the weapon. Okay, so the next step that I'm going to do, see this poses obviously he's holding a weapon. Ignore the baggy pants. Okay, so fastest way that I found for this is, because a lot of times you'll have keys in the area. So I'm going to just take my rotate. For me, it's just one key. Select shoulder, move it in position, get it semi-close to what the more natural motion if you were crouching without a weapon. Um, and I need to see if I can actually work for this because okay, so this is probably a good example. Let's say that yeah, okay, so let's say this. So the way that I found, just as a quick trick, let's say that this one I wanted to rotate it up. Now I do have auto key on in case you didn't catch that. But as you can see, graph editor. So I know that these are the values that I want to get to. Easiest way that I found possible to do this is copy that value, select all your subsequent keys, paste it. So now his arm is stable because otherwise if we didn't it would quickly pop back versus if I do that same process, you see the keys are there, some other paste, and that gets us pretty, you can see now the arm doesn't move. So I'm going to move that back. But that's what I would do if I were going through, if I was going through the skeleton and I needed to transpose all the keys on there and moving them. So, all right, we'll click on this. I'll move the forearm down. In this case, static key, static key. So that shouldn't move. And normal. Okay, so this will be a perfect example of this. I'm going to move his arm down, position, just something that looks more natural. Okay, so we can see our keys. I'm going to take this value, copy it, X, all my subsequent keys, paste. So same. I'm going to move this tangent to flat so it moves that little hump. Take my Y, same exact process. And see, take that little hump, flat. So let's see what that looks like. I play the animation. Not terrible at all. Creation issues, so it looks like we're fine. All right, so I'm not going to go into refining this, but at this point, I would probably just go through um, and possibly just add a little bit more secondary motion to this one. Like, for example, when he's moving, just add a little bit of bounce shoulder. But again, that's not the purpose of this video. All right, so I'll go ahead and save the file. I've got the animation that I want, and it looks good. So here's now, this is also an important step. I'm going to save the file, and it's over. So this is my where the file is located at right now, which again is just on my local system. And what we're going to do is in your game SDK folder, you should have an animations folder. And you, as long as it's inside of this animations folder, you're fine. You don't need to worry about anything else. So in this case, I'm going to do two steps here, but this is just purely just so I don't override our project stuff. But I'm going to take it. I just created another folder called Maya. Um, our animations will eventually end up in this human, male, locomotion, and you'll see there's no weapons in W. Yeah, crap. So yeah, don't worry about that for right now. Animations and my Maya file. So I'm going to copy the one that we just did, which is the walk. Copy it over to here. It's very important that it exists inside of this game SDK folder. Really, the reason for that is that there's something in the compiler when you export that allows it to export out as the ICAF. Otherwise, if you keep it on a local folder outside of the CryEngine game SDK folder, it won't actually work. All right, so same exact file. I'm going to go ahead and open it. See the path. Walk. Opening files. Finishing. Which is good. That's what we want. All right, so the process now for this is I'll go to Windows, Preferences, Settings Preferences, and under Settings, I will change my up axis from Y to Z. That's it. Don't worry about anything else. It's fine. You can see that he's still moving in the correct direction. That's just it. If you keep it up in Y axis, when you export out the animation, the character will invert itself and look terrible. So that's what I'm going to keep this as. All right, so open up Crytek will open up the export window and animation manager. Timeline is set. I will double check. '49. So in the animation manager, I'm going to do a new range from slider. So our start frame was 0 to 49. Now we're going to name it just the exact same file. Which is the same as our file name. And the root is going to be the joint of the rig that you're going to be using on your character, which in this case is not the SDK rig, it's our custom rig. Bippo1 as my root. I will add it. Animation. I don't need to worry about the export path since it's already in that folder. And I will export all in. The first time you export, you will get this unable to load bug file. Hasn't written it yet. And then, holy crap, what happened? This is actually a known bug. You can hide warning. Crytek is aware of it. Hopefully they'll fix it soon. All we need to really see is that it's generated the uncompressed CAF file and the export has finished. So, okay, and double check. All right, so this is the animations folder where we copied the Maya file, which you can see is inside of our game. Okay, animations, and this is inside of our Maya file. So we can see here now that it created a new folder. Voila, there's our ICAF file. So I'm going to move this into, all I'm doing is copy and pasting this into the folder that I'm using, which is under the animations, human, male, locomotion, and W crouch. This file path is not necessarily critical as long as it's inside of the animations folder. This just happens to be where our project files. So I've copied that over. Now, over to CryEngine. All right, so I am going to open up the animation import. Should be this one. And okay, so now you can see when you open that, stuff in black is all your new stuff. So in this case, we have locomotion and W crouch. Should be the exact same. Yep, that's the exact same as the file that we just copied over. I'm going to double click this one and my skeleton male, because that's the one that we're rigging it up to. This is our skeleton that we're using. So the same one that we saw the skeleton used in Maya. This is that one. We'll click it. Save. That's it. So now that animation is now hooked up to our custom rig. So let's double check it.